Welcome, everybody, to the award-winning RotoWire Fantasy Basketball Podcast. We are brought to you by RotoWire's free trial at rotowire.com/try for a free look behind our paywall. We're also brought to you by Edge Boost and PoolGenius. It is Friday, March 14th. Alex Barutha here with Kirien Sprecher. Shannon is out with an illness. Ken is load managing. He is in Florida, I believe. And I don't know if you can see people who are watching on YouTube, it appears that I've ascended into heaven. It is so bright in this room with the sun coming through the window after being gone for all of winter. I want to see if I can adjust this. It's actually pretty funny. But Kieran, let's jump straight into the news. Paul George, tell me if you heard this one before. He is consulting with doctors on his multitude of injuries, which include groin and knee injuries. He is deciding, or the doctors are deciding, it's kind of unclear whether or not he will undergo surgery, but that decision is expected to be made early next week. I have two questions for you. One, if you have Paul George on your roster,
why?
I mean, is this what do you even do here? And then two, he's been out for so long, and Maxi's been out, and Embiid's been out. Is there really? Do you feel like there's a strong potential waiver wire ad here?
Look, I'm so over talking about the 76ers. If any of the viewers on the Friday show tune into the Wednesday show, you know that me and Mike have coined Paul George Pinky P this year. He's just not going to play. A toe injury, a pinky toe, or a pinky injury, whatever it is, Paul George and this 76ers team, this story has been – we've seen this storyline since the first month of the season, and anything – that nothing's going to change that, especially as we get closer to the end of the season. If you are still relying on PG-13, like, I'm sorry, you're probably not in a good spot. We saw Lonnie Walker pop off a little bit. He's now also on the injury report. Grimes is like the clear guy to go to here, in my opinion. I had a viewer question on Discord the other day, and he had dropped Paul George for Kelly Oubre, and then he had Kelly Oubre, who was also on the injury report, and he wanted to go after Grimes. And I was just going back and forth with him. He's in like a 10-team league, and I asked him to send me a screenshot of the waiver wire guys. And Denny Advita and Stefan Castle were both available in this guy's league. So, like, sometimes when we're talking on this show and we're like, here's a direct replacement, sometimes there's a lot better players that are still available in these leagues, especially if you're not playing with a lot of sharps. So long story short, like, don't rely on any of these 76ers, especially Paul George, especially Tyrese Maxey. Grimes, maybe, because he's not like a big time name. He still needs exposure at the league at the NBA level to get another contract and that type of thing. But Grimes and maybe a little Kelly Oubre.
It is bleak. That is for sure. We also, this entire news section is essentially going to be an injury report because we had De'Aaron Fox undergo season-ending finger surgery. We kind of knew this was coming. They were waffling a little bit, like, "Oh, we're going to do it now or after the year." And it's like, come on, like after Victor Wembanyama went down, it's like, what are we really doing here? He had a great game, and then immediately they were like, "No more of that, please. You are done now." So, I guess, what do you anticipate the fantasy / roster fallout of this being? Because I can sort of imagine now the Spurs are in a place where, like, yeah, Stephon Castle is going to get more run or more usage, I should say. But it's like, at this point, what are we doing with Chris Paul? What are we doing with Harrison Barnes? Are these guys going to really play out the string the rest of the year?
I didn't think Chris Paul was going to be playing this much even after the Fox trade, right? Like he stayed in the starting lineup. I thought, obviously having Paul as like a veteran presence, a backup point guard, play 20 minutes per game, like that's ideal. But he was playing 25 plus minutes every night. I still expect that to trend down. Yeah, Harrison Barnes is probably trend down too a little bit. I look at Vassell and Castle, maybe a little Julian Champagnie. You also have like Keldon Johnson, who's also put up a lot strong fantasy production for multiple years. But right with all of the new additions, like he just really hasn't had a role. The Spurs are in a weird spot because, like, yeah, they are kind of tanky now with Wemby and Fox out, but they don't really have like a plethora of young guys to turn to, right? Like this roster, you look at like Blake Wesley, David Duke, like these guys aren't going to like, they're not going to prioritize giving these guys developmental minutes over just like seeing what they have with the players under roster for the next couple seasons.
Yeah, I mean, we saw in previous years they were like, well, Malachi Branham, maybe that's a thing. It's not.
No.
So I don't know if they'll try that again this year. But yeah, you're right. I think this is. I saw some people picking up Sohan. I'm like, of course that makes sense. But yeah, this is a big wait and see. And I think we kind of know the main players there. We also had Bilal Coulibaly, who is likely out for the remainder of the season with a right hamstring injury. I thought it was funny that they were like, he's out 4 to 6 weeks. It's like, what are you talking about? Just like rule him out for the year. Like, what do you mean he's out 4 to 6 weeks? The Wizards to me, and we'll talk about. I have some Wizards. I have a Wizards player in the waiver wire section, and I see we're getting questions about Wizards players, and we'll get to those questions in a sec here. This Wizards team kind of feels like a fantasy goldmine waiting to happen because you have Coulibaly going down, and they're still playing Chris Middleton. They're still playing Marcus Smart. Maybe that comes to an end sooner than later. And then, who knows what happens with Jordan Poole. I think Poole will most likely keep playing. But there's just a lot of names on this team who, when they get 25 to 30 minutes, they are completely like rosterable and usable in fantasy.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And the Coulibaly thing, no Ken here, so I'll go on another little rant here. But weekly lineup leagues in fantasy are absolutely killer. A guy like Coulibaly, he was on a 4-game week this week. You start him. He plays 8 minutes Monday, and then you just have to sit there for the rest of the week. He played 8 minutes in a 4-game week. That's brutal. The 4 to 6 weeks thing, another thing that I can rant about with our job, we set that as he's going to come back in mid-April, right? And then we're never going to get another update from the Wizards all summer about Bilal Coulibaly. Maybe he practices, or maybe he goes to some showcase or something, and we can get a note clearing his injury. But he's going to have this injury all offseason, and people are going to be like, is Coulibaly fine? Is Coulibaly fine? It's like, well, yeah, he probably was fine 3 months ago, but the Wizards gave us a 4 to 6 week timeline, and then we never got another update for 3 months. So looking forward to that. Obviously, the Wizards are 14 games out of the play-in tournament, so they're not really playing for anything. But similar to the Spurs, they have so many old guys on this roster. Like you talked about Marcus Smart, Chris Middleton. You don't really have anywhere to like Corey Kispert's not like a young guy, right? Like he's been in the league for a while. So I think with Coulibaly's injury, you're talking about a gold mine. I'm still just looking at Alex Sarr, Keyshawn George, and Bud Carrington as like the guys that I expect to produce down the stretch, because I think they're going to get a lot of minutes.
Yeah, Washington is essentially locked into a bottom 4 draft pick. They have the worst record in the NBA by a half game above/below, however you want to phrase it, the Utah Jazz, followed by 2 games below the Charlotte Hornets, 3 games on the Pelicans. Then it jumps all the way up to 7.5. So they're a full 7.5 games up on the number 5. And so Washington's pretty much got a 50% chance for a top 4 and probably a 12 to 14% chance to get Cooper Flagg. Other assorted injury news, Kirien. Jagan Ivey is out of his boot and is eyeing a return this season. Probably not the fantasy season. Yeah. Omax Prosper for the Dallas Mavericks is done for the year. He was kind of playing like 16 minutes a game, so that's not like huge. Maybe just more for Najee Marshall, the GOAT. LeBron James, day-to-day. He will be day-to-day following today's game against the Nuggets. And then Josh Giddey hopes to return sometime on the Bulls' 6-game road trip, which I think started yesterday or today. Very soon. He should be back in a few games. Do any of those particularly stand out to you? Do you have any hot takes on any of those minor injuries?
Like you said, that with Ivy, probably not fantasy related because he's probably not going to be back for that stretch of the season. But I'm very curious, just from like a basketball perspective, what his role will be when he's cleared to play. Cade, Tobias, Duran, those roles are going to stay the same. Tim Hardaway, Malik Beasley have been really great as just floor spacers. They're better shooters than Ivy. Obviously, they don't bring the rest of the table that Ivy brings. And then you have Asar. He's the wild card defender. He can run the fast break. And then Dennis Schroeder is just the backup point guard, like a veteran backup point guard. Like I'd rather have Dennis Schroeder in the backup point guard role than Ivy. And Ivy probably brings some more to the table, but Schroeder's been in it. He's had the
he's more of a pure point guard
on the national stage, and he's done that before, right? So I'm very curious where Ivy fits. I think he's still like a good player, but the Pistons have kind of like graduated to this next level, right? Of like maybe not contender status, but like solid playoff team, and they did that without Ivy. So I'm just curious to see how he fits in when they're all good. And then obviously, like, of course, the Lakers lose 3 in a row. Well, they're playing Denver tonight. That's gonna be another tough matchup. And then LeBron's like, "All right, I'm good. I'm coming back in, guys."
Yeah, you lose a game to the Nets and to the Bucks, and it's like, okay, all right. Yeah, the Ivy question is interesting. I mean, this Pistons team, I mean, for a team that's this good, 37-30, I still have a lot of questions about their roster. Like, can Asar and Jalen Duren really play together? How does Ron Holland fit into that? Like, none of these guys can shoot.
Yeah.
And then the one guy who can shoot, that's your young guy, Jaden Ivey. You've been way better since he's not been playing. He has the second worst on-off on the team now after they've gone in this run. I don't want to look too much into that, but like, to me, it feels like they might explore trading him. I don't know how you feel about that, but I think you got to at least listen to offers in the summer and like see if another team that's in a worse position than you, if Charlotte or Washington or whoever comes calling, you might be like, well, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, with Shannon gone, I think we should disparage the Pistons as much as possible. First round exit getting swept, and then they're trading everyone away. No, and I think we're both like, Ivy can be a solid player in the league right now. The timeline, like his fit just is weird because the Pistons have done this without him. And you said you had questions about like their roster. I think that this team right now for this season is like really well built with like a mix of veterans and young guys. But I think like for like the next 3 to 5 years, who's going to be around Cade? I think that's a good question. Does that make sense?
It does. I think they did the right thing where they just brought in veteran shooters.
Yeah.
Because they're like, well, at the very least, we need space because we're not going to have it otherwise. So it's like, well, these guys like Tim Hardaway and Malik Beasley, all they want to do is play 28 minutes a game and have a chance to just launch up as many threes as possible. So like everyone's happy.
Yeah.
Right. All right, we have a word from our friends at PoolGenius, and then we will get to the listener questions. Do you want to win more in your golf, March Madness, and football pools? PoolGenius gives you data-driven picks and strategies to outsmart the competition. With over a decade of analytics and historical data, PoolGenius is the only site dedicated to exclusively to helping people win sports pools, with PoolGenius users winning 3 times more often than expected. RotoWire listeners get exclusive offers. Visit poolgenius.com/RotoWire for up to 55% off, or start a 4-day free trial. That is poolgenius.com/RotoWire. Okay, we have some listener questions to get to. First, the proverbial YouTube first in the chat, Jeff Martin. Is Justin Champagnie and or Trey Jones worth an ad for next week? Drops would be Filipowski or Ty Jerome. I will talk about Justin Champagnie later. So I say he's worth an ad. I really considered also putting Trey Jones in my waiver wire pick. So I think the answer to your question is yes, sort of. If your drops are Filipowski and Ty Jerome, though, I am not sure that Kirien, would you definitely drop Filipowski or Ty Jerome for either of those players?
I definitely wouldn't drop Filipowski. I would definitely think about dropping Ty Jerome. Throw as many superlatives in there as I can. I think the Ty Jerome situation, I'm really high on him. And I thought it was more like a real life value than a fantasy value thing. As long as Donovan Mitchell and Darius Garland are healthy, I think Jerome is going to be limited to like just a little offensive production off the bench every once in a while. I think Filipowski has a really high upside. And then I think Justin Champagnie has a really high upside, and not really high, but higher than Ty Jerome, and Trey Jones has a higher upside than Ty Jerome at this point. So I would rank them probably Filipowski, Champagnie, Trey Jones, Ty Jerome.
That works for me. P-Dub is wondering if DeAndre Ayton is worth a pickup. I would say no because we don't have real updates on him. But I understand why you're asking. How do you feel, Kirien?
Yeah, I'm gonna go no. It was out 4+ weeks in mid-February, so we're at the 4-week mark, right? But that 4+, I would say that maybe we get a reevaluation next week, and then that would probably means another week from now. So if you're looking for production next week, definitely not. But if you're kind of P-Dub, if you're kind of looking forward towards the championship in like 3 or 4 weeks from now, maybe. But only if you have a spot available. Like you don't need to drop anyone that you're gonna would be starting next week. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and there are a lot of caveats with Ayton. It's like, well, if you're in like an 8-team league, I don't think you really have to worry about it. If you're in like a 16-teamer with an IR, it's like, well, if the IR is free, I mean, there are a lot of worse things you can be doing with that spot. Andrea asks, he's interested in dropping Najee Marshall. Personally, I would. He's the GOAT. I would never do that. But drop Najee Marshall from Moses Moody or Jose Alvarado because the Mavericks only have 2 games next week. So I guess the question really is, Kirien, is Najee Marshall? Are you holding Najee Marshall for the rest of the season, or do you have him in the streamer zone?
I would hold him for the rest of the season. Obviously, like if you need to win to make the playoffs, or this is a playoff week, you got to do what you got to do. And I'm trying to see how many games the Pelicans have this week. Do you have that off the top of your head?
I don't have it off the top.
Pelicans have 4 games next week, and the Warriors also have 4 games next week, I believe. So if you need to win next week, I would probably back dropping Najee Marshall just because like this is win or go home, right? 2 games. I'm going to take the 4-game option over a 2-game option anytime. What about you?
Yeah, if you need to win this week, because Alvarado had been like not a rosterable player for 2 weeks essentially, and now he's kind of back. Past 4 games, 14 points, 6 assists, 2 steals. Shooting's a little hot, but nothing crazy. And then Moody, yeah, I mean, as long as Pajemski's out, I don't really know how that roster is going to shake out once, like, obviously they have Jimmy in there now, and then Kuminga is back, and Pajemski's going to come back. So, yeah, if you need to win this week, I can understand it, but I would really prefer not to drop Najee Marshall.
Yeah, I agree with that. The Warriors also have a back-to-back to start next week. I don't assume Moody wouldn't be resting during a back-to-back, but just thought I'd throw that in there.
I've seen some Justin Champagnie and Orlando Robinson questions in the chat. I will be getting to those later in my waiver wire section, so you can stick around for that. Let's see here. Do you think that Valanciunas and Zach Collins are still worth holding on to, or is this like I firmly have these guys in the wait and see territory where it's like so like yesterday, Valanciunas played 14 minutes. I think that's a matchup thing. You're going up against Golden State. They also get smoked, 130 to 104. Before that, Valanciunas played 22 minutes when Sacramento got, again, smoked by the Knicks, 133 to 104, but still had 10 and 13. I'm gonna wait on Valanciunas, and I have said on this very podcast, Kirien, that I would hold Zach Collins because the Bulls do not have forwards that I would even bother giving minutes to, like in Julian Phillips and Dalen Terry. Now I know they got Patrick Williams back. I might put Patrick Williams in that category. But how do you feel about these guys?
Yeah, I don't know how closely you're paying attention to the stake league transactions, but before this week, so like 2 weeks ago, I put in heavy waiver wire claims for Collins and Valanciunas. Obviously, 16-team league. I only need defensive production, rebounds, and field goal percentage. So these guys fit that bill perfectly. With Vucevic back, I benched Collins this week and kind of am upset about that. The 3 blocks yesterday. 3 blocks right now is the difference between like 12th place and 9th place. So like that goes a long way. But yeah, I'm in the same boat. I think these guys, even with Vooch back, Collins is playing strong minutes. And like you said, probably can play with Vooch at times. And then Valanciunas, Sabonis, getting close to a return, but again, it might be the same situation where he's playing 25, 28 minutes at first and Valanciunas still gets in there. I'm definitely higher on Collins than I am on Valanciunas, but might as well hold them if you can right now.
We'll go 2 more questions, but they're kind of in the same vein, which is, I mean, at this time of year, we're getting a lot of questions from listeners that essentially are like, do I drop this really good player who clearly should be rostered because their schedule is bad for my playoffs? So Christopher is asking, is it worth dropping Kawhi for the playoffs because he plays 3 times next week and the next 3 weeks they're 2 back-to-backs? And then kind of the reverse of this question, which we also talked about with Aiton, Jeremy's asking, hey, someone dropped Jalen Williams, like the good Jalen Williams from the Oklahoma City Thunder. I'm in 4th with the playoffs starting next week. Should I pick him up despite our latest headline on RotoWire being, quote, no timetable for return? Do we think it'll be long-term? He's thinking of dropping Paul George. Now, if you're asking me, would I drop Paul George for Jalen Williams? Yes. But broadly speaking on these 2 types of questions, or even these 2 specific questions, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so obviously the Kawhi thing with the back-to-back, we can assume that 3-game week turns into a 2-game week. So again, it's just simple math at this point. I wasn't a math major. If I can do the math, you can do the math. The player with the 4-game week needs to just get half of the production per game as Kawhi needs to. So, you know, if you think Kawhi is going to have 25, 5, and 5, you just need to find a guy that averages 12, 3, and 3. And that it's basically the same production for next week. There's a lot of guys in the league that average 12, 3, and 3. So I would be fine with moving on from Kawhi. The Jalen Williams thing, yes, if you're talking about dropping Paul George for Jalen Williams, absolutely, that's a must. But again, doing those transactions, you have to have a spot on your roster that is a hole, like Paul George is a hole. Like he's basically just a blank spot. So definitely fill that in with a guy that may be able to help you out in the future, even if he can't help you out this week or next week.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, everybody, for the questions. We appreciate them as always. Before we get to our waiver wire section, we have a word from Edge Boost. Kirien, have you ever had your debit card declined or had to call your bank at 3 a.m. in Las Vegas? Edge Boost is the first consumer-facing online bank dedicated to the gaming industry. There are numerous benefits to using Edge Boost. $250,000 per day in debit deposits with unlimited withdrawals. Cash back on sports betting, DFS, and sweeps. You can deposit $25, get $25, 100% approval for all gaming activity, financial segmentation for discretion and responsible gaming. Compatible today for prediction markets, iCasino, DFS, sports betting, lottery, brick and mortar casinos, horse racing, and sweeps. No transaction reviews or account freezes. Visit edgeboost.bet today and use promo code ROTOPOD, edgeboost.bet/ or just promo code, I should say, ROTOPOD. All right, it's so everyone's been waiting for, Kirien, the waiver wire. We are going to do 3 waiver wire suggestions each. One of these players is a quote-unquote long shot, which is rostered in fewer than 25% of Yahoo leagues, although essentially all of my picks fit that bill. In terms of the schedule for next week for people in weekly moves leagues, we do have the Magic and the Mavericks with 2 games. Everyone else has 3 or 4. I'm going to kick things off. Miles McBride for the New York Knicks. This is not too surprising, but he's only 27% rostered. He started the past 3 games without Jalen Brunson, averaging 13 points on some kind of wacky shooting splits, 36, 43, 57, hitting 3 threes a game, though, 6 assists, 3 stocks, and 2 rebounds in 35 minutes. That translates to 32 fantasy points per game, which I think is pretty much going to stick around while he is in the lineup. 4 games next week for the Knicks. To me, this is just like you just go to the waiver wire and do this. I'm not thinking too hard about this one.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I am a huge Miles McBride fan. Deuce McBride. Last year, we know everybody who follows the Knicks or follows the NBA knows how much Thibs likes to play his starters, right? And so to carve out a 25+ minute row off the bench is like unheard of for teams with him. And that's what McBride was able to do last year. And there was a lot of reports coming out about how McBride is like Thibs' ideal player, right? never going to complain about his role. When he gets an opportunity, he's going to step up and he's going to be ready, blah, 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 blah. I drafted in the same stake league that I just was talking about with Zach Collins and Jonas Valanciunas. I drafted Miles McBride because I had Mikal Bridges and Josh Hart. And I was like, if Mikal Bridges or Josh Hart ever misses time, which they hardly ever do, I'll have Miles McBride, or Jalen Brunson. I'll have Miles McBride and I'll throw him in. I rostered Miles McBride all year, man, all year. Just waiting for this opportunity. And then when this opportunity finally comes, I have no need for 3 points or assists or free throw percentage at all. So I'm very upset about this situation. I'm happy for everyone who can benefit from Miles McBride. This dude, he's not Jalen Brunson. I'm not going to say that, but he is the ideal insurance policy. When we talk about, we don't like to use the term handcuffs, insurance policies in fantasy football with a backup running back. Miles McBride is the ideal backup to have when there's a big injury. He's going to play 30 plus minutes until Brunson comes back. He's going to hit threes. He's going to get steals. This is, like you said, don't think about this too much. Just click add. Should be your top waiver wire add this week if he's still available.
I feel like McBride being there gave the Knicks a little more. They're like, maybe we can get rid of Emmanuel quickly.
Yeah.
In this trade for Anunoby. Same with Barrett.
I mean, in 16 starts last year, 18 points, 4 assists, 3 dimes, 1.5 steals, shot 48% from the field, 58% from free throw, 42% from 3. Like almost a 50, 40, 90 guy. He's Thibs' ideal guy, and he's going to play a lot of minutes coming down the stretch.
Who is your first waiver wire suggestion?
Not as happy about as Miles McBride, obviously, but I'm going Tari Eason. No Amen Thompson. Eason has been starting over Jabari Smith. There are breast concerns with Eason, which is probably why he's not rostered in more than 50% of leagues, because the production is there when he's on the court. But there's no back-to-back next week for the Rockets. They play 4 games. Over the last 9 games, he's averaging 15.6 boards, 2 threes, 2.5 stocks. Even when Jabari Smith gets a start ahead of Eason still can produce in limited minutes. So this isn't a situation where I'm like, in a weekly league, I'm like, oh, he's starting Monday. Oh, he's on the bench Wednesday. Like, no matter what role he's in, I can count on Eason. So this is kind of like a safer play with a little higher upside when he is hitting his threes.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like everybody who's deep into fantasy basketball is very aware who Tari Eason is. And the fact that he's starting now and getting real minutes is it's nice. I mean, Jabari Smith's still playing off the bench too. So yeah, man, hard to turn down the production of Tari Eason when he's getting the minutes. I'm gonna move on to Orlando Robinson. It's here, everybody. Tanking season is here. He got a standard deal with the Raptors on March 4th. I feel like that should have been, that's like the market signal. That's like the buy market signal. Past 7 games for Orlando Robinson, 10 points on a bizarre shooting split of 43% from the field, 42% from 3 on low volume, and then 83% from the line. He's actually a pretty good career free throw shooter and is in like the mid 70s. So that's, if you need a big man with good free throw shooting, he fits that. But 10 points, 8 rebounds, 2.5 assists, 1.6 stocks in 25 minutes over his past 7 games. That translates to 27 fantasy points. 2 nights ago against the Philadelphia 76ers, this man had 25, 12, and 6. Jakob Poeltl was out the other day with rest. And other players on this roster have just been sitting. Been a lot of AJ Lawson, a lot of Jaden. Is it Jaden Rogan or Jalen Roden? I feel like I'm Jared. My God. Yeah, I should just if you know it starts with a J, you should just guess Jalen at this point in the NBA. But yeah, I mean, I think Orlando Robinson, he clearly puts up numbers when he gets the minutes. If they're going to keep going back and forth with this Poeltl thing, and he was getting minutes when Poeltl was playing. So he's basically, worst case scenario, going to split minutes with Jakob Poeltl. Best case scenario, Poeltl sits some games, Robinson plays 30 minutes. Yeah,
I only have 2 notes here. I think solid pickup. I'm very upset at Darko for resting guys. This happened when they benched Quigley and Barrett in the fourth quarter of a game that they were winning, and then still almost came back. So then, upset about the tanking thing, but I don't think that's going to change in Toronto. So I think Orlando Robinson's going to play a lot because Pirtle's going to rest. Jonathan Mogbo's also missed 5 games. I don't think he's coming back anytime soon. At least there hasn't been a report of him coming back soon. So I think Robinson is the clear number 2 and maybe even the number 1 moving forward. The only concern is about like his profile is the field goal percentage isn't necessarily like a traditional big man field goal percentage. And I think as they continue to rest guys, he might get a little more confident, for lack of a better term. And he might feel like he can shoot 20 times. So that just might be like something to look out for. But if you're in a points league, I think this guy's going to get boards. He's going to get shot attempts. He's going to get defensive stats for sure.
I'm looking at his shot chart or his shooting frequency on cleaning the glass right now. He is 33% of his shot attempts come from the short mid-range. This man just launching up floaters like he's Hartenstein.
Yeah.
It's like a Hartenstein. Oh man, I'm blanking now. Who was it? Was it Rashawn Holmes? Who's always throwing up that mid-range when he's on the Kings?
Rashawn, that sounds right.
Yeah. Anyway, who's your next waiver wire suggestion?
My next guy is Scoot Henderson. This is another guy that you're probably well-versed in, and you probably picked him up at one point and then probably dropped him again. And you're probably like, well, why is this happening? He's only rostered in 35% of Yahoo leagues right now because of that fluctuation in production. Over the last 12 games, he's averaging 15 points, 4.5 assists, 3 boards, and 2 3-pointers. The production's like ticking up a little bit. He's still operating off the bench. You got Denny Avdija, you got Anthony Simons, you got Shaedon Sharpe, all operating kind of above him in like a usage standpoint. But Portland has lost 5 straight games. They were kind of getting close to that play-in tournament, but they're not really in the picture anymore. I expect a lot of rest for Denny, for Jeremy Grant, maybe even Anthony Simons down the stretch. And I think we're going to see another big push for Henderson at the end of this season. If you remember last year, up and down rookie season, not great. And then over the last 14 games last season, he averaged nearly 20 points and 10 assists per game. Maybe not that type of production, but I am expecting a big uptick for Scoot over the next couple of weeks.
He's playing with confidence, man. Saw those highlights against the Knicks. He was running circles around guys, literally ran a circle around Mitchell Robinson. But yeah, just the confidence. He's playing with it's a lot of physicality. So yeah, I think he's set for a good rest of season. I'm gonna rewind a little bit because we have a question in the chat from JJ Styles. Isn't Jonathan Mobo coming back soon? And I don't know if that was in response to something you said or my Orlando Robinson pick. And it seems like he may come back soon. But what I will mention is that he's been out for 4 games. And they immediately signed Colin Castleton, who has played the last 4 games and is playing a ton of minutes. So I think when Mobo comes back, I'm not really worried about Orlando Robinson. I mean, they don't even really play the same position. Mobo's kind of like he's sort of a power forward. Mobo doesn't really have a position.
A small ball 5 on occasion.
Occasionally a small ball 5, sometimes a point nothing.
I think when Pirtle got hurt earlier in the season, Mogbo played a lot. He was kind of like the guy that played minutes. So I think maybe there's like a disconnect between his position and when Pirtle is out. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, for people who don't, Mobo is 6'7", 225 pounds. He's, you know what I mean? He's not. But no, I mean, it's a fair question because, but I mean, they're just sitting everybody. In terms of Orlando Robinson, I'm not worried about Mobo. I'll just kind of put it like that.
Yeah, that's totally fair.
My long shot, people have been asking about him, Justin Champagnie of the Washington Wizards, who is 6% rostered. Bilal Coulibaly essentially done for the season. Champagnie has started the past 2 games. He's played combined 64 minutes. That's good. When seeing at least 30 minutes this season, Champagnie is giving you 15 points, 9 boards, 3 stocks, and an assist for about a fantasy point per minute. Wizards also have 4 games next week. And then Kirien and I talked about at the top of the show, in addition to Coulibaly being out, how many more games are Chris Middleton going to play? How many more games is Marcus Smart going to play? Maybe they do something with Kispert. Who knows? But we saw this from Champagnie before, and I know his minutes had been a little more up and down as a starter earlier in the season, but I think he's pretty much locked into high 20s to low to even mid 30s at this point in the year.
Yeah, I mean, I think both Champagnies are rosterable during the fantasy playoffs, which probably makes Mama Champagnie very happy. But like I think we know what to expect. We've seen when he gets minutes, what he can produce, and it's not a superstar caliber production, but it is consistent, solid points, and that's what you need in the playoffs. My long shot is Adem Bona, the fifth string center for the 76ers. Yes. Look, I know we started the show off and I said you don't want to roster any 76ers, but if you've been following along, I am in a very dark hole in our stake league. All I'm paying attention to is steals and blocks and field goal percentage. It's a weird hole to go down. But Bona had 5 blocks last Sunday. If I had an additional 5 blocks right now, I would go from being a buyer to being an eater in the stake league. So this is big time production we're seeing from Bona. Joel Embiid's out. Andre Drummond is in and out. Yabusele is not a big man, right? Bona's been playing well over the last 3 games, 13 points, 9 boards, nearly 4 stocks a night. So that 4 stocks is really what I'm centered around. And obviously that's kind of skewed by the 5 block performance, and we can't expect 5 blocks every night, but I do think Bona is going to play 20-25 minutes a night. He's going to get a block or 2. And if that's what you need, like I need, Bona's a fine target to go after for a really cheap price at this point in the season.
Yeah, we'll say we do have, I can't remember if it was last year or the year before, on our RotoWire player pages, we added we call it the stat review, but it's really like a percentile breakdown of how guys fare against the rest of the NBA. So if you need like a very quick, who is Adem Bona? Like, what is he up to out there? You can scroll down on the player page. He has a 7.3% block rate, which is like the green bar is all the way across. And that means he blocks 7% of all 2-point shots when he's on the court. That's an elite number and a ridiculous number. He also is one of the better offensive rebounders in the entire league, 11% offensive rebounding rate. Some people in this, we get occasionally some questions for people who are like, I play in a 15-cat league, offensive rebounds count. Adem Bona. Also gets to the free throw line a lot. Its percentage doesn't necessarily help you at 66%. But yeah, I mean, you said all of the actual tangible items, which is like Drummond, who knows? Obviously, Embiid is out. Yabusele seems like he's banged up. Bona's going to play.
Yeah.
Okay. I think that wraps it up for us, Kirien. Thank you for filling in for Shannon. And I think Ken will be back in a couple of weeks. We'll figure things out. Good luck in the RotoWire Stake League. I also wish that to Nick, because he has Scotty Barnes and he is feeling it as well.
Yeah, it's just one of those things. I should have done a better job drafting. I was really conservative drafting, and then everyone got hurt. And that's not an excuse. Everybody gets hurt for every team. But when I'm talking about, I need Adem Bona, Jonas Valanciunas, Zach Collins to get me blocks. And my original starting lineup had, Jalen Suggs, Derek Lively, DeAndre Ayton, Bilal Coulibaly. Like, I had so many great defenders on my team. Jonathan Kuminga is finally coming back. But, we all need to take an L. You got to learn from your losses and go from there. Can't be a winner every year.
I did not realize that you were rostering the jump man himself, Jericho Sims.
Yeah. On Sundays when the waiver wire was going down, I was debating between Bona and Sims, Bona and Sims, Bona and Sims. And then Bona kind of had a bigger game. And I was like, I should go Bona, but I didn't know what was going to happen with Drummond and those guys. But it's brutal. It's not a fun part of the season for me, but I was talking about Miles McBride, similar. I dropped Emmanuel Quigley in a 16-team league, and I felt like I messaged Shannon about it, and I'm like, is this poor sportsmanship? Like, he's not going to help me at all. I'm 200 points away in points, steals, or points, assists, 3 points. So he's not going to help me. So I need guys that it's just a fantasy basketball is a funny thing at this point in the season.
Yeah, I mean, I dropped Brandon Ingram. It's a different situation, but I was just like, I'm not. What am I doing with this guy? But the thing is, this is how fantasy basketball goes. I mean, you are not the only person in fantasy leagues across the world being like, I think I have to drop Emmanuel quickly.
Yeah.
And the thing is, our league, I don't know the exact date stake league ends. It's before April, I believe.
It's March 30th, I think. So we only got like 2 weeks left.
Yeah, and we do weekly waivers. So basically, someone's best case scenario is they pick Emmanuel quickly up and get like 4 games out of him.
Yeah.
Maybe. So,
just, any viewers that are still paying attention, this is how bad of a hole I'm in. I dropped Emmanuel Quickly and Miles McBride for Jonas Valanciunas and Zach Collins. Like, Emmanuel Quickly, Miles McBride maybe were in my starting lineup like 2 of the weeks heading into this, but and now they're solid producers, and it sucks, but it is what it is.
You got stuff happening in the keeper league though, don't you?
A little bit. Wemby, the Thompson twins, Paulo Banchero, we're chilling.
You got Max Christie on a G League contract in our keeper league. That's pretty nice.
Yeah.
Well, we won't bore people with all of our league talk, but we'll get out of here, Kirien. Thank you again for
anytime.
All right, see you everyone. We'll see you next week.
Later.